During World War II, the Nazis weren't just fighting on battlefields. Behind closed doors, they were running strange and secret experiments, mixing science, mythology, and superstition. They were trying to prove something no real scientist ever could: that one race was superior to all others. To do that, they sent expeditions to faraway places like Tibet, studied ancient myths, and carried out horrifying experiments on prisoners. It sounds like fiction, but it was real. These so-called occult experiments reveal how far the Nazis went to turn their beliefs into facts. In this video, we'll uncover what they were really searching for and how their obsession with race, myth, and power led to some of the darkest experiments in history: the search for the perfect race. The Nazi belief system was built on the idea that Germans belonged to a pure and ancient race called the Aryans. They thought this race was smarter, stronger, and more advanced than all others, but there was no real proof for this claim. To make it look scientific, Heinrich Himmler, one of Hitler's top men, created an organization called Ahnenerbe, which means ancestral heritage. Its main goal was to find evidence that supported Nazi racial theories. Researchers from Ahnenerbe traveled to different countries, collecting bones, measuring skulls, and studying old texts. They hoped to prove that the Aryans were the original creators of civilization. One expedition went as far as Tibet in 1938, searching for links between ancient Tibetans and Europeans. They found nothing useful, but Nazi propaganda claimed it was a great success. Pseudoscience and cruel experiments. Inside Germany and occupied territories, Nazi scientists tried to prove racial superiority through medical experiments. These were not really scientific studies, but brutal acts on helpless prisoners. In concentration camps, especially Auschwitz, victims were used for testing drugs, vaccines, and survival methods. Prisoners were exposed to freezing temperatures, infected with deadly diseases, or operated on without anesthesia. Many of these experiments were done to see how German soldiers could survive in extreme conditions. Dr. Joseph Mengele, one of the most infamous Nazi doctors, focused on studying twins. He performed painful experiments to learn about heredity and genetics. Most of his victims were children, and almost none survived. The Nazis also looked for ways to control reproduction. They wanted to prevent people they called undesirable, such as Jews, Roma, or people with disabilities, from having children. This led to horrifying sterilization experiments using radiation, chemicals, and surgeries. All of this was done under the false idea of science, the obsession with ancient myths. While some Nazi scientists worked in medical labs, others were searching through myths and ancient stories. Himmler and many SS leaders believed that ancient legends contained clues about Aryan origins. The Ahnenerbe funded studies on old Germanic symbols, runes, and sagas. They believed these could prove that Germans were descendants of a lost, powerful civilization. They even studied Atlantis, claiming it might have been an ancient Aryan empire that disappeared long ago. Nazi researchers also explored old pagan religions, witchcraft, and medieval legends. They collected thousands of books and documents about witch trials. Himmler thought that ancient German witches were actually wise women from the old Aryan religion, destroyed by Christianity, border science, and the supernatural. The Nazis also became interested in what they called border science, areas of study that were not accepted by real scientists. This included telepathy, astrology, and dowsing, which they thought could help find water or hidden objects. Himmler encouraged experiments in these fields, believing that the mind and nature had untapped powers. Some researchers even tried to connect ancient myths with modern technology. For example, they studied the story of Thor's hammer from Norse mythology and suggested it might represent a real ancient weapon or a form of energy. Although none of this research produced any real evidence, it showed how deeply the Nazi regime mixed science with fantasy, Eastern religions, and racial theories. The Nazis were also fascinated by Hinduism and Buddhism, especially ideas that mentioned Aryans. In ancient Sanskrit, the word Arya means noble, but Nazi thinkers twisted it to mean a biological race. They believed that the people who wrote the ancient Indian scriptures were part of the same race as the Germans. This was completely false, but they used it to connect German culture with respected ancient civilizations. The expedition to Tibet was part of the plan. They wanted to find proof that their so-called Aryan ancestors once ruled across continents. Why the Nazis turned to the occult. The Nazi obsession with the occult wasn't just curiosity, it had a purpose. After losing World War I, Germany was broken and ashamed. Hitler and his followers needed a story that could rebuild national pride. By mixing myths, history, and pseudoscience, they gave Germans a new identity, one that claimed divine origins and destiny. The idea that Germans were descendants of a powerful ancient race made people feel chosen and united. Himmler even redesigned an old castle called Ruelsburg into a spiritual center for the SS. It had rooms decorated with runes and symbols, meant to serve as a temple for their imagined Aryan order. This blending of politics, myths, and science gave the Nazi ideology emotional power. It wasn't just about power anymore, it became a belief system. The fall of the myth. As the war went on, these experiments and projects began to lose importance. Germany was losing battles, and resources were redirected to the front lines. Many researchers tried to destroy their files before the Allies arrived. When the war ended, the truth came out. Allied soldiers found documents, equipment, and human remains that revealed the full horror of Nazi experiments. The Nuremberg trials exposed how doctors and scientists had turned research into crimes. The supposed discoveries of the Ahnenerbe and other Nazi institutions were proven false. Their expeditions and experiments produced no real scientific value. What remained was evidence of cruelty and corruption. After the war, most of the occult archives were destroyed or lost. A few researchers were tried for war crimes, while others escaped punishment. But their work left a deep mark on how the world viewed science and ethics. What they were really searching for. At the heart of all these projects was one goal: to turn lies into truth. The Nazis wanted to reshape history to fit their worldview. They wanted science to prove their racism and myth to justify their rule. Their so-called discoveries, from racial measurements to mystical symbols, were all meant to give their ideology a sense of destiny. But instead of finding truth, they exposed how far people can go when power replaces morality. The Nazi occult experiments remind us that when science loses honesty, it becomes a weapon. When belief turns into hatred, it destroys everything it touches. Lessons from history. The story of the Nazi occult experiments is not only about the past, it's a warning for the future. When leaders use false science to control people, or when myths are twisted to support prejudice, the results can be deadly. The Nazis claimed they were searching for knowledge and truth, but what they really created was fear, suffering, and death. Their obsession with race and the supernatural blinded them to reality. Real science questions itself and seeks proof. The Nazis used science as a mask for cruelty. Even now, this dark chapter stands as a reminder that the pursuit of power can corrupt even the brightest minds. The Nazi occult experiments were not about uncovering ancient secrets. They were about building lies strong enough to rule a nation. And they failed, because truth cannot be created through hate. If you found this video informative, make sure to like it, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves learning about hidden parts of history. And tell us in the comments, what do you think was driving these experiments more? Pure curiosity or pure power?